Before we begin, take a moment to pause, to breathe, and step beyond the edge of what history has told us. The world you know is only a fragment, a shadow of stories buried beneath dust and silence. Here, in Mysteries of Earth, we follow the whispers, through forbidden texts, vanished empires, and ruins that defy time itself. Every like, every share, and every subscription helps us keep these echoes alive, bringing light to truths long hidden and voices long forgotten. Together, we uncover what was meant to be erased, piece by piece, memory by memory. So, if you are ready to see beyond the veil of history, join us and let the journey begin. This is Mysteries of Earth. There are places on Earth that whisper to us from before the dawn of history, where stone remembers what language has long forgotten. Göbekli Tepe is one such place. Hidden beneath the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, this ancient temple rises from 12,000 years ago, a time when humanity was not supposed to build anything so vast, so deliberate, so sacred. Archaeologists once believed that temples came after civilization, that only settled societies could create monuments. Yet Göbekli Tepe turned that story upside down. Here, hunter-gatherers, people who still wandered the land, gathered to raise towering pillars of limestone, some weighing as much as 40 tons. They carved them with animals, symbols, and silent gods. Lions, vultures, serpents, and foxes watch from the walls, guardians of a forgotten age. Each stone seems to speak a language of myth and ritual, a memory of a people who already understood the stars, the seasons, and the spirit of the earth. They aligned their structures with celestial patterns, hinting at a knowledge far beyond their supposed means. And then, inexplicably, they buried it all. Layer after layer, the people who built Göbekli Tepe entombed their masterpiece beneath the soil, as if hiding it from the world. Why? Was it an act of reverence, sealing their temple for the gods? Or was it fear, an attempt to preserve their sacred ground from an approaching catastrophe? No one knows, but beneath that silence, something profound lingers. Göbekli Tepe challenges not only our understanding of prehistory, it challenges our understanding of ourselves. It tells us that civilization may not have been born from chaos, but from memory. That before our written words and kingdoms, there were people who dreamed in stone, who looked at the stars and saw more than survival. They saw connection. Standing there today, surrounded by the stillness of those circles, you can almost hear the echo of their chants, the rhythm of hands shaping belief into form. The air feels older than time itself, and as the sun sets over the Anatolian plateau, one can't help but feel that humanity has been here before, building, worshipping, forgetting, and beginning again. Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological site. It is a message, buried in the earth to survive the flood of history. A reminder that the story of civilization did not start with us. It merely continued. Beneath the sun-scorched lands of the Fertile Crescent, where rivers once gave birth to the first whispers of civilization, something ancient stirs again. It is not found in temples that reach the sky, but in faint outlines beneath the earth. Patterns that satellites barely see, yet they form something hauntingly deliberate, a network. In recent years, LiDAR technology, a form of laser mapping that peels back the skin of the earth, has begun to reveal forgotten worlds. Across Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and into the Levant, faint circular formations and buried enclosures have emerged, their geometry echoing that of Göbekli Tepe. These are not random stones, nor natural coincidences. They suggest coordination, intention, a unity of vision stretching over hundreds of miles. Could Göbekli Tepe have been only one node in a far greater spiritual web? If so, the story of humanity's awakening must be rewritten. Imagine the world 12 millennia ago, before cities, before kings. Communities scattered across the Fertile Crescent gathered in places of ritual, guided by unseen alignments to the stars. Each site, though separated by valleys and rivers, shared similar symbols, the same T-shaped pillars, the same carvings of animals, the same silent reverence toward the heavens. It was as if they all heard the same call, a cosmic message carved into stone. Archaeologists once believed civilization began in isolation, small pockets of progress that slowly spread. But what if it was never isolated at all? What if there existed a prehistoric network of knowledge connecting distant peoples through shared myth and purpose, a spiritual internet before writing, before history? Some researchers call it the Neolithic horizon, a mysterious moment when humanity seemed to leap forward all at once. Farming, astronomy, stonework, and social ritual appeared not gradually but suddenly, like an awakening that rippled through the ancient world. LiDAR now shows us the traces of that awakening. Temples buried under desert dust, foundations erased by floods, patterns invisible to the naked eye. They connect in ways that suggest migration, communication, and perhaps even pilgrimage. Göbekli Tepe may have been the heart of this network, the axis mundi, where earth and sky met in ritual. Yet just as quickly as it appeared, the network vanished. The builders abandoned their sanctuaries, the symbols faded, the crescent that had birthed so much light sank into shadow. Was it climate that ended it, a sudden shift that scattered its people? Or was it a choice, a great forgetting, as if humanity decided to seal away what it once knew? Standing in those empty fields today, where stone once touched the stars, one cannot help but feel the gravity of that silence. It is as if the earth itself remembers, the faint pulse of an ancient order that once stretched from Anatolia to Mesopotamia, uniting humanity in a shared vision of the cosmos. We dig, scan, and map, but what we are really uncovering is not just architecture, it is memory. A memory of a time when humanity moved not by conquest, but by connection. When the crescent was not merely fertile with life, but fertile with truth. In the heart of southern Africa, where savanna meets stone, lie the remains of a forgotten empire, Great Zimbabwe. Its walls rise in silence now, curved and defiant, built from thousands of granite blocks stacked without mortar. Yet even after centuries, they still stand, a testament to a people whose genius once reshaped the African landscape. For centuries, outsiders looked upon these ruins with disbelief. They saw the precision, the artistry, the scale, and decided that Africans could not have built them. Early explorers called it the work of Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the lost tribes of Israel. But they were wrong. Great Zimbabwe was African, built by Africans, for Africans, a center of trade, culture and power that thrived long before colonial eyes ever turned toward the continent. Its name itself, Jimba Zimbabwe, means houses of stone. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, it was the beating heart of a vast kingdom, the Zimbabwe Kingdom, which controlled trade routes linking inland Africa to the Indian Ocean. Gold, ivory and iron flowed through its gates, bound for cities as distant as Kilwa and Cairo. The city's elite lived in stone enclosures, while thousands of others thrived in the surrounding valleys, farmers, craftsmen, astronomers, and traders bound together by faith and prosperity. But the most haunting beauty of Great Zimbabwe is not just its architecture, it is its silence. No cement binds the walls, yet they have endured the sun, the rain, and the weight of time itself. Each stone seems to hum with memory, whispering of a civilization that mastered balance between humanity and nature, between earth and ambition. When colonial explorers stumbled upon it in the 19th century, they refused to believe what they saw. Their worldviews could not allow such sophistication to be African in origin, and so they rewrote the story, stripping the society of its heritage, erasing its name from history books, and claiming it as a mystery instead of a masterpiece. Archaeologists later proved the truth. It was indeed the work of the Shona people, whose descendants still live in Zimbabwe today. Yet the damage was done. The empire that had once been a symbol of African brilliance was recast as an anomaly, an exception to the myth of European progress. Standing atop the great enclosure now, one can see far across the valley. The wind carries whispers from the stone walls, and in the distance, birds trace circles above the ruins, as if guarding something sacred. There is a gravity to the place, an ancient dignity that survives even the scars of revision. Great Zimbabwe is not merely a ruin. It is a monument to resilience, a defiance of false history, a testament to the ingenuity of a people who built kingdoms in harmony with their land. Its story is not one of mystery, but of erasure and of recovery. For centuries they tried to silence it, but the stones remember. They still speak of a time when Africa's empires reached for the horizon, when walls of granite rose not for conquest, but for identity. And now, after so long in shadow, great Zimbabwe once again stands in the light, as the empire they could not erase. There was a time when the name Timbuktu was whispered with awe, not as a distant outpost on the edge of the desert, but as the beating heart of knowledge. Long before the Enlightenment flickered in Europe, a golden light burned here in West Africa. It was a city where scholars studied the stars, where merchants carried not only gold and salt, but ideas, and where books were more precious than any treasure. In the 14th and 15th centuries, under the reign of the Mali Empire, Timbuktu rose from the sands as a beacon of learning and trade. The caravans that crossed the Sahara brought silk, spices, and ink, converging upon this city by the Niger River. But the true wealth of Timbuktu was not its gold, it was its wisdom. At the center stood the Sankore University, one of the oldest seats of learning in the world. Thousands of students came from across Africa and beyond, from Cairo, from Fez, from Andalusia, to study mathematics, law, philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. Within the shaded courtyards, scholars debated the nature of the soul, the movement of the planets, and the meaning of justice. Manuscripts filled the libraries, written in Arabic, in Songhai, in Fulani, works that explored science, theology, and the mysteries of the universe. It is said that in Timbuktu, books were worth their weight in gold. And it was not a metaphor. Families guarded their manuscripts for generations, copying them by hand, passing them down like sacred heirlooms. There were catalogues of stars and treatises on healing, poetic verses about ethics, and even detailed accounts of how to calculate the Earth's circumference, centuries before European explorers claimed to discover the globe. Yet history would not allow this light to shine freely. When European colonizers arrived in Africa, they found ruins of empires, but not the narratives they expected. A continent with universities, scholars, and scientific advancement did not fit their myth of superiority. And so, Timbuktu was buried under the sands of ignorance, not by time, but by design. Colonial powers rewrote Africa's past, portraying it as primitive, devoid of intellect and history. Timbuktu, the jewel of African scholarship, was reduced to a word of mockery, a symbol of remoteness, of nowhere. Its libraries were looted, burned, or left to decay. The desert crept closer, swallowing the pages that once carried the light of knowledge. But knowledge is resilient. Even as empires fell and libraries turned to dust, the people of Mali hid their manuscripts, in attics, in chests, in caves. Families risked everything to preserve their heritage. And in recent years, thousands of these manuscripts have resurfaced, fragile yet defiant, their ink still whispering across time. open one, and you find not myth, but mastery. Charts of constellations, commentaries on Plato, medical prescriptions made from desert herbs. The handwriting of ancestors who knew that to write was to resist oblivion. Timbuktu reminds us that civilization does not belong to one continent, one color, or one creed. It is a river that flows through all of humanity, sometimes hidden, sometimes silenced, but never destroyed. In the silence of the desert, among the shifting dunes, the wind still carries echoes of the scholars who once gathered under starlit skies, reciting verses, debating truth, and mapping the heavens. And perhaps that is Timbuktu's greatest secret, that long before the world forgot, Africa remembered, and it wrote it all down. In the humid lowlands of ancient Mesoamerica, where rivers cut through dense jungles and the air hums with unseen life, colossal faces rise from the earth, silent, immovable, and staring into eternity. They are the stone heads of the Olmec civilization, each carved from basalt, some weighing more than 20 tons. Their expressions are human, yet somehow not entirely. Long before the Maya built their pyramids, before the Aztec Empire rose to power, the Olmecs flourished. Between 1500 and 400 BCE, they carved out one of the first great civilizations of the Americas, and yet they left behind no written history, no clear explanation, only art, mystery, and stone. Each colossal head bears unique features: broad noses, full lips, helmets carved with precision. They gaze outward as if remembering something beyond the horizon. Scholars have long debated their meaning. Were they portraits of rulers, warriors, gods, or something else entirely? The craftsmanship suggests mastery of tools, logistics, and design far beyond their time. To carve and move these massive stones, some transported from over 80 kilometers away, required knowledge and coordination equal to that of the world's earliest civilizations. And yet, the enigma lies not just in their scale, but in their style. The faces appear almost global, reminiscent of people far beyond the borders of ancient Mexico. Some claim to see African, Asian, or even Polynesian traits within the basalt visages. While most archaeologists agree the Olmecs were indigenous to the region, the question remains, why do their features and symbols seem to echo distant lands? The Olmecs were more than sculptors. They were astronomers, engineers, and map-makers. Their ceremonial centers aligned with celestial bodies. Their art depicts jaguar gods and hybrid beings, suggesting an early fusion of nature, spirituality, and cosmic order. The famed Wer-jaguar motif, half human, half animal, appears again and again, hinting at shamanic rituals that sought communion between worlds. But among the carvings, some symbols remain stranger still. Depictions of what appear to be advanced instruments, strange helmets, and even aerodynamic shapes that defy simple interpretation. Could these be remnants of knowledge passed down from an older, forgotten civilization, one that perished before recorded history began? In Mesoamerican mythology, there are stories of beings who came from the sky, who taught early humans how to count the stars and measure the seasons. The Olmecs were said to be the first to receive this sacred knowledge, a bridge between the gods and the earth. Whether these are symbolic myths or faint memories of something real, no one can say. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived millennia later, they found the jungles already reclaiming the Olmec world. Entire cities were swallowed by vines, and only the great heads remained, guardians of a secret buried in time. Today, as archaeologists uncover more beneath the soil, a picture begins to form of a civilization advanced in ways we still do not fully understand. The Olmecs built not with conquest, but with cosmic purpose. Their monuments align with solstices, their art reflects geometry, and their myths speak of celestial descent. Perhaps the answer does not lie in who they were, but in what they remembered. The faces carved in stone might not depict gods or kings, but ancestors, messengers of a time when the boundaries between heaven and earth were thinner, when memory was carved not on paper, but into the bones of the planet itself. The jungle may have silenced their cities, but their faces endure, staring through centuries, inviting us to remember that civilization did not begin. It began again. Long before the Aztec warriors marched across the Valley of Mexico, before the Maya carved their towering temples into the jungles of the Yucatan, an older intelligence had already shaped the land, quietly, mysteriously, and with a precision that defies explanation. In the deep layers of Mesoamerican history, there is a moment of awakening, a sudden leap from tribal simplicity to architectural mastery, from oral myth to cosmic mathematics. Cities began to rise almost overnight, aligned perfectly with the stars. Stone calendars appeared that could predict eclipses, solstices, and the movement of Venus with uncanny accuracy. The question that haunts historians is simple. How did it happen so suddenly? When the Maya emerged, they already possessed a complex writing system, an advanced understanding of astronomy, and one of the most accurate calendars ever devised. The Aztecs, too, spoke of an age before their own, a time when the gods walked among men, when teachers from across the sea brought the knowledge of counting, of stone-cutting, of the heavens. These stories echo through countless indigenous traditions. In the highlands of Guatemala, the Popol Vuh tells of divine beings who shaped humans and taught them the cycles of time. In central Mexico, Aztec legends recall Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a pale-skinned, bearded teacher who came from the east, bearing wisdom and laws. When his mission was done, he departed over the ocean, promising to return when the stars aligned once more. To the modern scholar, these are myths, yet the patterns they describe are unmistakable. Across distant cultures, separated by oceans, the same motifs appear: visitors from afar, bringers of knowledge, founders of civilization. Could these shared myths be echoes of a forgotten chapter in human history, one that predates our known empires? Archaeological evidence hints at something profound. In sites like La Venta and San Lorenzo, remnants of the Olmec, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica, reveal advanced urban planning, sophisticated drainage systems, and artistic mastery. Yet even the Olmec seem to have inherited much of their knowledge from an earlier source, a lost lineage of teachers whose origins remain hidden in time. What stands out most is the unity of design, temples built in perfect geometric harmony, aligned with solstices and celestial crossings. Ancient engineers seem to possess a deep, almost spiritual understanding of the Earth's motion and its connection to the stars. Their monuments were not merely places of worship, they were cosmic instruments designed to synchronize human life with the rhythm of the universe. And then there are the seas. The coasts of Mesoamerica tell stories of contact: shells from the Caribbean found inland, jade from Guatemala traded north, and myths that speak of ships of light crossing the waters. Whether these were actual voyages or symbolic memories, the theme is consistent. Knowledge came from afar, and it came suddenly. As centuries passed, this knowledge fractured and scattered. The Aztecs inherited fragments of prophecy. The Maya guarded astronomical precision. Yet all looked back to an earlier golden age, a time when their ancestors spoke directly with the gods, when the stars were not just distant fires, but guides. Perhaps the teachers were human, explorers of an age long forgotten, whose traces were washed away by time and tide. Or perhaps, as the ancients believed, they were something more, visitors from beyond the horizon, carrying the seeds of civilization across oceans and eras. Before the Aztecs, before the Maya, there was memory of builders, astronomers, and dreamers who shaped the first great civilizations of the New World. And though their names are lost, their legacy endures, written not in ink, but in stone and starlight, whispering still through the jungles of Mesoamerica. There are few symbols in human history more haunting than the Library of Alexandria, that great temple of wisdom that once stood upon the shores of Egypt, where scrolls from across the known world were gathered under one roof. It was not just a building. It was a dream. The idea that all of human understanding could be preserved in a single place, safe from the erosion of time. Founded in the 3rd century BCE under the rule of the Ptolemies, the library was the crown jewel of the ancient world. Within its halls were the works of Greece, Babylon, Egypt, Persia, India, even rumored manuscripts from lands beyond the horizon. It is said the library contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, each hand-copied, each carrying fragments of humanity's collective mind. Here, scholars worked not for power or wealth, but for truth. They measured the circumference of the earth, charted the heavens, and dissected the mysteries of life itself. It was within these walls that Eratosthenes first calculated the size of our planet with remarkable accuracy, that Herophilus mapped the human nervous system, that Archimedes dreamed of mathematics that would one day shape the modern world. But where knowledge grows, power grows uneasy, and Alexandria, for all its brilliance, became a threat to those who ruled by control rather than truth. Knowledge, after all, is liberation, and liberation is the enemy of empire. The story of its destruction is not a single tragedy, but a series of them. 4 fires, each one burning not just scrolls, but memory itself. The first came with Julius Caesar, whose troops set fire to the docks during battle in 48 BCE, and the flames spread to the library's outer chambers. Thousands of scrolls turned to ash, their words rising into the Egyptian sky like black snow. But the library endured, rebuilt and restored, until new rulers came, and new fears. As Rome gave way to Byzantium, and pagan philosophy clashed with emerging faiths, Alexandria became a battlefield of ideas. The Serapeum, the daughter library, was destroyed by Christian mobs in the 4th century CE, its scrolls declared heretical, its scholars exiled or slain. Later, when Islamic conquest swept across Egypt, new rulers again weighed the worth of the old knowledge. Legend tells that the library's remaining books were ordered to be burned, their pages used to heat the city's bathhouses for months. Whether that final tale is truth or myth, the symbolism endures. Knowledge destroyed by power, curiosity silenced by fear. What, then, was so dangerous about those scrolls? Some say they contained maps of lost continents, records of forgotten civilizations, or treatises on sciences that would not re-emerge for another 2,000 years. Others believe they held sacred texts, the origins of humanity, the secrets of energy, the keys to the cosmos. Whatever they contained, one truth is certain: it was too powerful to be allowed to survive. And yet, not all was lost. Fragments of the library's wisdom were carried away by fleeing scholars, hidden in monasteries, buried in desert caves, smuggled into the hands of thinkers who would one day ignite the Renaissance. The fire that consumed Alexandria's walls could not consume the human spirit that built them. Today, when we speak of the Library of Alexandria, we speak not only of loss, but of potential, of what humanity once dared to imagine. It reminds us that knowledge has always been both our greatest light and our greatest danger. For the Library of Alexandria was not destroyed once. It is destroyed every time truth is silenced, every time curiosity is punished. But as long as there are those who seek, who question, who preserve, its flame still burns. And perhaps, somewhere, beneath the sands, or within the archives of forgotten empires, a few of its scrolls still wait, whispering to be found once more. When the flames consumed the Library of Alexandria, many believed the world's greatest knowledge had turned to ash. But legends speak of something else, a secret flight of wisdom carried not by fire, but by human hands. In the chaos before the fall, a quiet exodus began. Scrolls, thousands of them, vanished into the desert night. Whispers tell that scholars, scribes, and monks risked everything to save what they could. They knew that once the torches reached the shelves, no empire, no philosophy, no generation could ever rebuild what would be lost. So they wrapped their scrolls in linen, sealed them in clay, and entrusted them to the sand, the one element that could preserve what time and tyranny could not. These were not ordinary texts. They were said to include writings from the House of Life, the ancient Egyptian temple libraries where priests once recorded their cosmology, astronomy, and rituals of rebirth. Some were fragments from the Great Library itself, treatises on lost technologies, alchemical codes, and forbidden maps drawn from travelers who claimed to have seen beyond the known world. Where did they go? The trail leads into Egypt's vast and silent deserts, to places where stone and faith have endured when empires did not. Beneath the monasteries of the eastern desert, beneath the Coptic strongholds carved into the cliffs, rumors persist of sealed chambers filled with scrolls untouched since antiquity. One such place, whispered among explorers, is Deir al-Surian, the Syrian monastery of the Natron Valley. In the 19th century, a British scholar named Archibald Tate reported finding a hidden library there, parchments stacked behind false walls, written in Greek, Coptic, and Syriac. Among them were texts older than Christianity itself, preserved through millennia of sand and silence, but those were only what he was allowed to see. Local monks spoke on of deeper rooms, of collections sealed behind heavy stone, archives that had survived fire, conquest, and time. Some believed they contained the very scrolls smuggled from Alexandria before its final fall, hidden by those who understood that knowledge must sometimes go into hiding to survive. Archaeologists have long searched for evidence of such caches. In the 1940s, a similar discovery, the Nag Hammadi Library, revealed ancient Gnostic Gospels buried in jars near the Nile. It was proof that secret preservation had indeed taken place. But the Nag Hammadi texts were only a fragment, a single spark from a much larger fire that once illuminated Egypt's intellectual world. Could it be that the true legacy of Alexandria, the lost scrolls of philosophy, geometry, medicine, and myth, still sleeps beneath the monasteries of the desert? Some say that the Vatican itself has obtained copies of these writings, quietly studied under the name Hermetic Codices. Others suggest they remain hidden by Egyptian monks, awaiting a time when the world is ready to understand them once more. If true, then these hidden scrolls represent more than ancient paper and ink. They are the voice of a civilization that refused to let its knowledge die, a silent rebellion against the darkness that sought to erase it. Perhaps, buried deep within the sands, sealed away in chambers only the desert remembers, the last guardians of the ancient world still keep watch, over words that could rewrite history and reveal that humanity's first light of wisdom never truly went out. It merely went underground. Long before the first words of Genesis were ever written, long before the first human hand shaped clay into a god, there are whispers of other worlds, other humanities, lost in the turning cycles of creation and destruction. The idea is as ancient as thought itself, that Adam was not the first, but merely the latest. Ancient manuscripts, from forgotten corners of theology and mysticism, speak of pre-Adamic civilizations, beings who walked the earth before recorded time, intelligent and powerful, yet doomed by their own creation. In the sands of Mesopotamia, fragments of the Sumerian king list tell of rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the flood, not decades, but millennia. It describes an era when kingship descended from heaven, when the gods still walked among men. Then, as if struck by some cosmic reset, the flood swept over the earth, and history began anew. In Egypt, the same pattern repeats. The Turin Papyrus, an ancient scroll preserved in fragments, lists dynasties of divine beings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the pharaohs. The priests of Heliopolis called them the Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age when the gods built cities along the Nile and mankind lived in harmony with them. But it was not to last. The world changed, the stars shifted, and the gods withdrew, leaving only ruins and myth behind. Even in Abrahamic texts, the notion lingers like a shadow. Early Islamic scholars such as Ibn Kathir and al-Tabari spoke of nations before Adam, destroyed for their corruption. In mystical Judaic writings, the Sefer HaTemuna hints at cycles of creation, entire worlds that rose and fell before ours. One rabbi described them as worlds unworthy of sustaining, dissolved by divine decree. What if the earth itself remembers these lost ages? Scientists now speak of civilizational amnesia, the possibility that humanity's deep past extends far beyond the narrow window of archaeology. Beneath the oceans lie megalithic structures, like the drowned ruins of Yonaguni in Japan or the Gulf of Cambay in India, too old, too complex, and too deliberate to dismiss as natural. Could these be the echoes of a world that predated ours? Perhaps the pre-Adamites were not gods, but a civilization so advanced that they seemed divine to the primitive eyes of those who came after. A world that harnessed forces we can only begin to understand: energy, consciousness, or the manipulation of nature itself. But as every cycle of myth teaches, knowledge untethered from humility leads to downfall. The floods, the fires, the cataclysms described in ancient texts may not be metaphors at all, but memories of a cosmic cleansing. Modern faith often avoids this question, for it shakes the foundation of our origin. If civilizations rose before Adam, then Genesis is not the beginning. It is merely the latest chapter. Humanity is not the firstborn of creation, but the heir of forgotten worlds. Perhaps this is why so many ancient manuscripts were hidden, burned, or sealed away. To preserve the story that humanity began with innocence, not inheritance. Yet deep in the margins of those texts, in languages few now read, the truth persists: that the earth is older than we dare to believe, and that our story is but one in an endless cycle of rise, ruin, and rebirth. If there were worlds before Adam, then perhaps they left something behind, not monuments of stone, but imprints in the human soul. A faint remembering that we have lived before, fallen before, and that the sands beneath our feet may hold the bones of gods who once called themselves human. Beneath the cobblestone streets of Vatican City, beyond the gilded halls of cathedrals and the echoing steps of pilgrims, there lies another world, a labyrinth of archives, sealed from the eyes of nearly all humanity. They call it the Vatican Secret Archives, though the Church now prefers softer names: Apostolic Archives, Restricted Collection. But words cannot change what it is: a fortress of memory, guarding the most dangerous thing on earth, knowledge. For centuries, this subterranean empire of parchment and shadow has grown quietly, beneath the heartbeat of Christendom. Over 85 kilometers of shelving, miles of manuscripts, maps, papal correspondences, and records that stretch back over 1,000 years. It is said that even the archivists do not know all that is kept there. Only the highest ranks of the Church, and the Pope himself, have the authority to enter its silent rooms. Officially, it holds the administrative history of the Church, letters of kings, decrees of emperors, the inked decisions that shaped nations. But whispers from within the Vatican walls tell another story, that among those documents lie texts so ancient, so heretical, that their mere existence would shake the foundation of modern history. Some say that deep beneath the archives, locked in vaults of lead and gold, rest scrolls rescued from the Library of Alexandria before its destruction. Others speak of pre-Christian manuscripts, gospels and prophecies suppressed because they describe a humanity older than Adam, a creation story that does not begin with Eden. In 1947, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, certain fragments mysteriously vanished before reaching public view. Some scholars quietly claimed the Vatican had obtained them, not to destroy, but to hide. Among the missing texts was rumored a scroll that spoke of civilizations before the flood, of beings of light who ruled the earth before man. Those who have seen the archives describe rooms where time seems suspended, ancient leather-bound volumes that crumble at the touch, hieroglyphic tablets sealed in glass, and entire wings where the shelves are marked only by symbols, not names. Some speak of a room referred to in whispers as the Archivum Immortalis, the Archive of the Immortals, said to contain writings that trace human origins not to divine creation, but to intervention from the stars. Of course, the Vatican denies these claims. To them, the archives are merely history's repository, not its keeper. And yet, what history has ever needed armed guards and locked vaults? What faith needs protection from the truth, unless that truth can rewrite the story itself? Perhaps the Church hides not to deceive, but to preserve, to guard what the world is not ready to understand. A record of humanity's forgotten ages, of cycles of knowledge rising and falling long before modern time. For within those silent rooms may lie the connection between the gods of antiquity, the watchers of Genesis, and the civilizations erased from the earth. And if such knowledge exists, proof that humanity's story began not in divine innocence, but in cosmic inheritance, then every empire built on the illusion of being first would tremble. So the doors remain closed. The air within remains still, the lights dim and sacred. Somewhere in that vast labyrinth, beneath layers of dust and doctrine, the past waits, silent, patient, and eternal. For one day, when the keys are turned and the doors are opened, the world may finally learn that the greatest secret the Vatican ever kept was not about faith, but about where humanity truly came from. In 1929, as scholars catalogued old manuscripts within the Topkapi Palace of Istanbul, a rolled piece of gazelle skin was unsealed, a map unlike anything the modern world expected to find. Drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, it depicted a world both familiar and impossible. South America was there, its contours precise, but extending far beyond it, a vast southern landmass, complete with mountain ranges and rivers, lay where Antarctica now sleeps beneath 2 miles of ice. At first glance, it was merely an old maritime chart, a navigator's relic from the dawn of exploration. But as cartographers studied it, the truth struck like thunder. Whoever made the original source maps of the Piri Reis chart had seen Antarctica before it was frozen, before glaciers entombed its coast some 6,000 years ago. The admiral himself confessed he was not the map's creator. He compiled it from older charts, from the time of Alexander, from the maps of the early seafarers, and from one of Columbus himself. Yet scholars soon realized these were not ordinary sources. The coastline of Antarctica, drawn centuries before its discovery in 1820, was not only accurate in shape, but matched modern seismic surveys of the land beneath the ice. How could a 16th-century sailor know what only satellites could later confirm? Some historians dismissed it as coincidence, a creative flourish of geography. But the precision was too deliberate. Mountains aligned perfectly with those mapped by radar in the 20th century. Riverbeds traced the same channels buried under glaciers today. It was as if someone, long ago, had seen the world from above, or from a time when ice had not yet claimed the poles. This was no accident. It was a remnant, a copy of a civilization's forgotten memory, a clue pointing backward into an era erased by time. The Piri Reis map became a key in the Giga rowing mystery of ancient knowledge, evidence that global navigation and precise geography existed long before Greece, Rome, or Egypt. Some scholars connected it to the myths of Atlantis, a seafaring culture whose knowledge of astronomy and Earth's curvature predated recorded history. Others saw it as a relic of a prehistoric global network, stretching across continents long before the accepted timeline of human civilization. Could it be that advanced cartographers once mapped the entire Earth, a civilization capable of measuring latitudes, longitudes, and coastlines with mathematical precision? If so, the Piri race map was one of the last surviving fragments of their legacy, passed down through sailors, scholars, and empires, each copying a shadow of something far older. Piri race himself admitted he did not understand the true origin of his sources. He merely combined them. Yet in doing so, he bridged thousands of years, preserving a glimpse into an age that the world forgot. Today, the map remains in Istanbul, fragile, faded, but defiant. Scientists debate its accuracy. Historians argue over its meaning. But the deeper question remains, how did anyone know what lay beneath the Antarctic ice? Perhaps before the last great flood, before the shifting poles and melting glaciers, another humanity walked the Earth, a people of ships and stars, whose maps charted coastlines we no longer see. The Piri race map, then, is not just an artifact. It is a mirror, reflecting a time when the world was smaller, yet infinitely more mysterious, when ancient hands drew the Earth as it truly was, long before ice, long before amnesia. It whispers from the skin of a gazelle. Across 5 centuries of silence, we once knew the whole world, and then we forgot. For centuries, Antarctica has been a realm of silence, a continent buried under 2 miles of snow and time. But in recent decades, that silence has begun to break. Radar scans, satellite imaging, and seismic readings have peeled back layers of ice to reveal something unnatural: sharp, geometric patterns, aligned corridors, and massive symmetrical formations beneath the frozen crust. These are not the chaotic shapes of geology. They are the fingerprints of design. It began quietly, military radar mapping missions in the mid-20th century, followed by modern ice-penetrating technology. Beneath the glaciers, scientists found shapes too precise to be random. Rectangular structures spanning hundreds of meters, massive domes, and ridges forming perfect right angles, the language of architecture, not nature. Yet the official reports remain vague, classified, or inconclusive. Whispers soon followed. Could there be a civilization buried beneath the Antarctic ice, one that predates every known culture on Earth? If so, the implications would rewrite everything we know about human history. Antarctica wasn't always a frozen wasteland. Millions of years ago, it was covered in forests, rivers, and life. Even as recently as 12,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age, climate shifts could have left its coasts temperate and habitable. Ancient myths from around the world speak of a great flood, of civilizations swallowed by water and ice. Could those memories be echoes of what once stood here? Some geologists argue the continent shifted suddenly due to crustal displacement, moving from a tropical position to its current poleward prison, freezing an entire civilization beneath it. Others believe the ice simply buried remnants of an advanced culture destroyed by cataclysm. The evidence grows stranger still. In 2016, leaked satellite images and restricted radar data from Wessex Turn Antarctica showed hexagonal formations and dome-like anomalies, one spanning over 400 feet across, resembling massive, deliberate structures. Explorers and whistleblowers claimed that deep beneath the ice, tunnels lead to warm caverns, kept liquid by geothermal heat, environments where life, or even hidden archives, could persist. Of course, the scientific establishment remains cautious, dismissing most claims as optical illusions, data misinterpretation, or natural ice formations. But the coincidences pile up. Ancient maps like the Piri race chart show an ice-free Antarctica, drawn with impossible accuracy. Mythologies from South America and Egypt both speak of gods from the southern lands who fled a world-ending flood. Even Nazi expeditions in the 1930s sought something under the Antarctic ice. knowledge or relics said to come from the old ones. What if those legends all point to the same truth? A buried civilization, a last refuge of knowledge before the cataclysm, a culture whose memory lingers only in the myths of Atlantis, Lemuria, and the Flood. Imagine it. Vast halls now entombed in ice, machines frozen mid-motion, libraries sealed in crystal silence, a world's final breath preserved under the coldest desert on Earth. And perhaps, if we ever melt enough of that ancient tomb, we might find not ruins, but warnings. The whispers from beneath the ice are not loud, but they are persistent. Each scan, each anomaly, each unexplained formation tells the same quiet story. Something once lived here, and it was not simple, nor primitive. The snow that covers Antarctica is not merely frozen water. It is memory, compressed and silent, holding the last traces of a world erased by time. And if the ice ever yields its dead, we may find that the lost civilization beneath it was not lost at all, only waiting patiently for us to remember. Long before maps drew the shape of our world, there was a story whispered across millennia, one that began not in myth, but in memory. It came to us through Plato, who claimed it was not a tale of fantasy but of history. Atlantis, a vast island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich, powerful, and brilliant, a place where knowledge, architecture, and technology rose to divine heights until it all vanished in a single day and night of tragedy. Plato described Atlantis as a world of concentric rings of land and water, temples plated in gold and orichalcum, and a people who once lived in harmony before pride drew them toward destruction. Most dismissed it as allegory, a philosopher's lesson on hubris. Yet the question remains, how could a story so detailed, so vivid, appear from nothing? Perhaps it did not. Across the oceans, fragments of that same story appear, echoes scattered across time. The Egyptians spoke of a lost land swallowed by the sea. The Maya remembered their ancestors fleeing a drowned homeland. The Dogon of Mali told of star-born teachers from a vanished island. Even in the frozen north, the Norse spoke of lands that once basked in eternal light before falling into darkness. What if these were not coincidences, but memories of the same cataclysm? In the past century, the ocean itself has begun to answer. Off the coast of Bimini, divers discovered walls of massive limestone blocks resting beneath shallow waters, perfectly cut, aligned, and out of place in geological time. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, colossal terraces and stairways descend into the sea, an underwater cityscape carved by human hands, long before history admits humans could build so. And in the Gulf of Cambay off India, sonar revealed submerged cities stretching for miles, complete with roads, structures, and artifacts carbon-dated to nearly 9,000 years ago. Each discovery deepens the same question Plato once asked: could an advanced civilization have existed before the Great Flood? If Atlantis was real, its destruction may have marked the end of a world, the fall of a global culture erased by rising seas and shifting skies at the end of the Ice Age. The survivors, scattered across continents, could have carried fragments of their knowledge to Egypt, to Sumer, to Mesoamerica, planting the seeds of civilization anew. Plato claimed the story came from Egyptian priests who told Solon that Atlantis perished 9,000 years before his time, almost exactly aligning with the flooding events we now know reshaped Earth around 11,600 BCE, the end of the Pleistocene, the Younger Dryas, the last great melt. Coincidence or confirmation? Even today, sonar scans continue to uncover anomalies beneath the Atlantic seabed. Symmetrical structures, submerged plateaus, and terraces too precise to dismiss as nature's whim. Yet for every discovery, the establishment looks away, labeling it myth, not mystery. Perhaps because to acknowledge it would mean admitting that human history is far older and far more cyclical than we are taught. Atlantis might not have been a single island. It could have been a network, a golden age of seafaring cities spanning the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, even the Pacific. Its memory may linger in every story of gods who fell from the sky, or kings who drowned in pride. Myth or memory, it may not matter. For every ruin that surfaces beneath the waves, every coral-covered wall or temple-shaped stone whispers the same truth. Something extraordinary once lived where the ocean now reigns. And as the tides continue to recede and technology peers deeper into the abyss, perhaps one day the sea will give up its dead, and Atlantis will rise again, not from the water, but from the memory of the earth itself. Before continents took their modern shape, before maps were drawn and oceans claimed their names, ancient mariners told stories of lands that once bridged the world, vast continents beneath the rising sun, now swallowed by the waves. They called them Lemuria and Mu, names that linger like fossils in the memory of humanity, echoing across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. The legend begins not with myth, but with science. In the 19th century, naturalists studying fossils of lemurs found on both Madagascar and India puzzled over their strange distribution. Between the two, across thousands of miles of open ocean, the same species had once lived. To explain it, scientists proposed a lost landmass, a sunken bridge connecting East Africa, India, and the islands beyond. They named it Lemuria. But as geology advanced, the idea of submerged continents was dismissed, replaced by plate tectonics and continental drift. Yet the myth of Lemuria refused to die, because in the cultures that fringed those same waters, the memory of a drowned homeland was already ancient, far older than the science that tried to deny it. In southern India, Tamil epics speak of Kumari Kandam, a vast kingdom stretching far into the Indian Ocean, home to philosophers, kings, and astronomers. The texts claim it was lost to the sea after a series of cataclysmic floods, a story eerily mirrored by the legends of Lemuria. In Madagascar, oral traditions recall ancestral lands that the ocean took, and in Polynesia, elders still tell of Hiva, the motherland beneath the waves. Half a world away, in the Pacific, explorers of myth spoke of Mu, another vanished realm. The idea of Mu first surfaced through 19th century translations of Mayan codices and later gained life through Colonel James Churchward, who claimed ancient tablets from India spoke of a mother continent in the Pacific. A land of 10,000 Fachentinsi, years of peace and wisdom, home to a civilization that taught the world before vanishing beneath a sudden deluge. Skeptics call it fantasy. Yet the Pacific holds evidence that whispers otherwise. Across the islands of Micronesia, megalithic ruins rise from coral reefs, like the basalt city of Nanmadol, its walls built from stones heavier than the builders could have lifted, its canals now choked with the tides. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument lies submerged beneath the sea, terraces, steps, and gates carved with impossible precision, all dated to a time when sea levels were far lower. Even in the Indian Ocean, near the coast of India and Sri Lanka, sonar scans have revealed submerged cities, ancient roads, and stone structures buried beneath centuries of sediment. Were these isolated cultures, or remnants of a once connected world, now torn apart by the ocean's slow, consuming rise? Perhaps Lemuria and Mu were not continents at all, but civilizations, sprawling archipelagos and island empires that flourished when coastlines stretched farther than they do today. When the last ice age ended, the sea rose 400 feet, drowning nearly every ancient shoreline on Earth. In that slow global flood, memory became myth, and history became legend. The stories that remain, from India's lost kingdoms to Polynesia's ancestral seas, may not be invention, but remembrance. They speak not of fantasy, but of amnesia, humanity's oldest. When we gaze into the depths of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, we are not just looking into water, we are looking into memory, the Earth's vast, silent library of what came before us. Lemuria, Mu Kumari Kandam. Different names for the same forgotten truth. Once, there were worlds beneath these waves, and perhaps in time the sea will reveal that they were never myths at all. Far out in the Pacific, beyond the reach of continents, lies the island of Pohnpei, and just off its eastern shore, rising from the coral reef, stands one of the most haunting mysteries of the ancient world, a city of stone, a labyrinth of canals, a fortress built on the ocean itself. It is called Nan Madol, the Venice of the Pacific. But to the people who live nearby, it is far more than that. It is a sacred place, a place of spirits, and a place built by giants. The ruins cover an area of nearly 200 acres, massive stone walls and platforms constructed from over 250 million tons of basalt, some blocks weighing as much as 50 tons each. These stones are stacked in perfect patterns, forming temples, tombs, and channels that interlace like the veins of a living city. Yet no one knows how they were transported there, or who built them. Because there are no quarries on the islet itself, the basalt columns must have been brought from miles away, across open ocean, somehow lifted, floated, or carried over the waves. Even today, with cranes and ships, such a task would be monumental. But the people who lived on Pohnpei 1,000 years ago possessed no metal tools, no wheels, and no beasts of burden. And yet, they built Nan Madol. Local legend tells of two brothers, Olisipa and Olosopa, sorcerers who came from the west in a great canoe. It is said they commanded the stones to fly through the air with chants and sacred fire. They founded a dynasty, the Saudeleur, who ruled from Nan Madol for centuries. But over time, the city turned dark, the rulers grew cruel, and the gods abandoned them. Storms came, waves rose, and the kingdom fell. The myths say the stones themselves wept as the ocean reclaimed them. Archaeologists believe Nan Madol was constructed around the 12th century, but even that timeline raises questions, because many of its architectural patterns rut. Assemble Megalithic sites half a world away, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and the ancient ruins of Southeast Asia. The similarities in engineering and design have led some researchers to wonder whether these cultures shared a forgotten connection, or inherited the same knowledge from a civilization long vanished. When divers explore the seabed around Nan Madol, they find more, walls and structures beneath the surface, hinting that what we see may only be the top of a much larger complex. Some believe the city was once part of a greater landmass, now submerged by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Others see it as a remnant of the lost Pacific continent, Mu, the mother civilization from which all others were born. But there is something deeper in the silence of Nan Madol, something that transcends theory or legend. Standing among those dark basalt walls, surrounded by endless water, one feels a strange awareness, as if the stones themselves are remembering. The architecture is not random, it is precise, aligned with astronomical points, designed to mark the passage of stars and seasons. It speaks of minds that saw the world not just as matter, but as meaning. Today, the jungle has reclaimed most of Nan Madol. Roots twist around the stones. The canals lie still. The once living city breathes only through wind and tide. But when the moon rises over the Pacific, casting silver light upon its ruins, it feels as if the builders have merely stepped away, and may yet return. The story of Nan Madol is not simply about lost technology or forgotten people. It is about memory, the ocean's memory, and ours. For beneath the waves of the Pacific lies a reminder that civilization is not a straight line, but a tide, one that rises, falls, and rises again. In the quiet halls of museums and the dust of forgotten ruins, there are artifacts that don't quite belong, objects that whisper of an understanding far beyond what history allows. They are dismissed as curiosities, misinterpretations, or coincidence. But together, they form a pattern, a shadow of a science that once illuminated the ancient world. Take, for instance, the Baghdad battery, a small clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod found near the ruins of ancient Parthia. It seems simple, even crude. Yet when filled with an acidic solution, it generates a small electric charge. 2,000 years before the modern discovery of electricity, someone had already learned to harness it. Was it used for electroplating gold, for medical purposes, or something we can no longer imagine? The further we look, the more the anomalies multiply. In the quarries of Egypt, massive granite blocks are cut with precision so fine that even modern diamond tools struggle to replicate them. Drill holes spiral with symmetrical perfection, their grooves too consistent to be made by hand. The pyramids of Giza, aligned with true north, and the celestial belt of Orion, seem to encode not only geometry but cosmic design, as if the builders understood both earth and sky as parts of a single equation. And in Peru, high in the Andes, lie the ruins of Sacsayhuaman, immense walls of stone so tightly fitted that even a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. Each block, weighing dozens of tons, is shaped into irregular polygons, yet they lock together seamlessly, as though molded rather than carved. How did they achieve such perfection? And more importantly, why? These mysteries stretch across the continents. In India, ancient texts describe flying machines, vimanas, powered by engines of mercury and sound. In China, a 2,000-year-old clockwork mechanism traces the heavens with mechanica, though precision. In Greece, the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck, reveals gears and dials capable of predicting eclipses, the world's first analog computer. Each discovery is an isolated spark, and yet together they form a constellation, a glimpse into a lost world of applied knowledge, where science and spirituality were not divided, but united. What if ancient people did not lack understanding, but rather saw the universe differently? What if their technology was not simply mechanical, but resonant, an interaction between matter, energy, and consciousness itself? In Egyptian temples, hieroglyphs show gods holding what appear to be bulbs or coils of light. In Bolivia, at Puma Punku, stones appear to have been shaped with machine-like precision, interlocking blocks with right angles and perfect cuts that seem to defy the primitive tools available at the time. And across the world, from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan, the same astronomical alignments appear: solstices, equinoxes, cycles of Venus, and lunar nodes, encoded into stone with impossible consistency. It's as though an older intelligence once whispered to humanity the language of the cosmos, a code we have only begun to rediscover. Modern science calls these artifacts out of place. But perhaps it is we who are out of context, disconnected from a time when knowledge was measured not in data, but in harmony, when energy was drawn not from fossil or fire, but from the earth itself. As the centuries passed, wars, floods, and dogma buried this knowledge, first in libraries, then in myth. Yet even now the evidence endures, in every impossible cut of stone, in every gear of forgotten machinery, in every unanswered question. The ancients may not have left us their blueprints, but they left us something greater, a challenge, to look beyond what we believe to be possible, to rediscover not only air science, but their understanding of wonder across every corner of the ancient world, from the deserts of the Americas to the hills of the Middle East. Stories echo of beings who once walked the earth in bodies far greater than our own. They were the giants, not of fairy tales, but of history's twilight, remembered in sacred texts, oral traditions, and even in the soil itself. The Bible speaks of them. There were giants in the earth in those days. The Nephilim, offspring of divine beings and mortals, said to have towered above humankind. In Greek legend, they were the Titans, who shaped mountains and fought the gods. The Norse called them Jotnar, primal beings of strength and chaos. And far across the ocean, the Maya, Inca, and Navajo all tell of great men who lived before the flood, too large, too proud, and too powerful to survive the age that followed. But myth alone does not explain what the ground has yielded. For more than a century, explorers, miners, and archaeologists have reported strange finds, skeletons far taller than any ordinary human. In the late 19th century, newspapers told of giant remains uncovered in the mounds of the American Midwest, skulls twice the size of a man's, bones stretching 7, 8, even 10 feet long. In the early days of exploration, bones were unearthed in Patagonia, the Caucasus, and Sardinia, each discovery sparking brief wonder before vanishing into silence, lost to museum vaults, private collections, or quiet confiscation. Were these exaggerations, misidentifications, or something more deliberately erased? Because alongside the physical traces, the stories converge. The Navajo spoke of the Starnakes, red-haired giants who came from the north and built vast cities before turning violent. The Basque tell of Gentilac, ancient builders who threw stones across valleys to raise dolmens and towers. In Bashan, now modern-day Syria, legends persist of Og, a giant king, whose bed was made of iron. And in nearly every version the giants fell not from age but from catastrophe, a flood, a war, or the wrath of the heavens. Some researchers have suggested these stories could recall a forgotten branch of humanity, perhaps a race of unusually tall hominids wiped out in prehistoric cataclysms. Others argue they reflect cultural memories of early civilizations, whose monument builders seemed larger than life to those who came after. But there are also whispers of lost excavations, sealed archives, and institutional silence. Reports once published in the Smithsonian's early journals describing abnormally large skeletal remains later quietly vanished. Photographs disappeared. Files went missing. Could it be that history, once rewritten, erased an inconvenient chapter? There is something haunting about this pattern, not because it speaks of monsters, but because it suggests we have chosen to forget. Our ancestors, who carved their stories into stone and song, may have been trying to preserve the memory of an age before ours, an age of great beings who shaped the earth itself. Look closely at the megaliths. At the doorways taller than 10 men, the tools no human hand could have easily lifted, the footprints fossilized beside extinct animals. These remnants hint at something we cannot quite fit into our timeline. Perhaps the giants of old were not merely physical beings, but symbols of a humanity that once stood closer to the gods, a time when strength, wisdom, and hubris reached too high and fell too far. And yet, in every myth, there remains a prophecy, that the giants may rise again when the earth remembers its oldest dreams. For if the bones of giants once walked this world, then maybe, just maybe, the story of humanity is far older and far stranger than we dare to believe. In the cradle of civilization, where the Tigris and Euphrates once flowed like silver veins through Mesopotamia, the ancients recorded their stories not on paper, but in clay. Thousands of cuneiform tablets, etched with symbols older than writing itself, tell a story that challenges everything we think we know about our beginnings. They speak of the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to earth. To the Sumerians, these were not myths, but history. The tablets describe them as powerful beings descending from the stars, bringing knowledge, law, and the arts of civilization. They built the first cities, Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, and taught humanity how to farm, build, and write. Kings claimed descent from them, priests served them, and temples rose in their honor. But beneath the reverence, there lingers something deeper, a sense that the Anunnaki were not gods in the spiritual sense, but beings of flesh and purpose. The texts describe Enki, the wise lord of water and creation, and Enlil, the stern master of the wind, brothers divided by power and destiny. They tell of Anu, the ruler of the heavens, and Inanna, the goddess of love and war, whose passions mirrored those of humankind. Yet in the background of these myths runs a startling theme. The Anunnaki engineered humanity. In the epic known as the Atrahasis, clay mixed with the blood of a god gives birth to mankind, servants fashioned to ease the burden of divine labor. The parallels to modern genetic manipulation are uncanny. Some researchers have wondered, were these stories allegory or memory? Did the ancients preserve, in myth, a record of contact with beings from beyond our world? Zecharia Sitchin, a controversial interpreter of Sumerian texts, proposed that the Anunnaki came from a distant planet called Nibiru, visiting Earth thousands of years ago to mine gold, not for wealth, but for survivor, to repair their own atmosphere. In return, they uplifted early humans, blending their essence with ours. It is a theory mainstream archaeology rejects, yet it continues to resonate, because the echoes of it appear everywhere, in the gods of Egypt, the Watchers of Enoch, the Nephilim of Genesis, and the Sky People of the Americas. Is it coincidence, or fragments of a single global story, retold in different tongues? Archaeologists find that Sumerian civilization appeared almost overnight, complete with writing, astronomy, irrigation, and mathematics. How did such complexity emerge so suddenly, with no apparent precursor? And why do their oldest tablets describe star systems, planetary orbits, and celestial mechanics with accuracy that seems beyond their time? Perhaps the answer is not that they invented this knowledge, but that they inherited it. In temple carvings and cylinder seals, we see winged beings standing beside trees of life, holding strange devices, offering gifts of knowledge to kneeling humans. To ancient eyes, these may have been gods, but to modern eyes, they seem eerily technological. Yet perhaps the greatest secret of the Anunnaki is not their existence, but their message. Their tales end in catastrophe, a flood sent to cleanse the earth, a rebellion among their own kind, and the fading of their presence from the human story. But they leave behind a promise that one day they will return. Whether the Anunnaki were gods, travelers, or symbols of a deeper human truth, their legacy endures, carved into stone, hidden beneath deserts, and remembered in every myth that speaks of beings descending from the stars. And as we gaze into the night sky, at the same constellations the Sumerians once worshipped, we might wonder if the story of the Anunnaki is not just about the past, but a memory of where we came from, and perhaps where we are destined to go. Long before telescopes, long before science had a name, ancient eyes looked up and saw order in the chaos of the heavens. In the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where civilization first took root, the Sumerians were not just builders of cities, they were architects of time. Their gaze was fixed not on the earth below, but on the sky above. Etched into clay tablets more than 5,000 years old are star maps and celestial charts so precise that modern astronomers still marvel at their accuracy. They recorded the movements of the moon, the paths of planets, and even the subtle cycles of precession, a phenomenon modern science rediscovered only in the last few centuries. How did a people with no telescopes know so much about the heavens? In the ruins of Uruk and Nippur, fragments of this ancient cosmic knowledge still whisper through time. The Sumerians tracked Venus, the morning and evening star, with an exactness that rivals modern observatories. They knew the lunar months, calculated eclipses, and divided the heavens into constellations that would later evolve into the zodiac, a celestial code carried forward by Babylon, Greece, and Rome. They didn't see the sky as distant or divine. To them, it was a living script, the will of the gods written in light. Every movement of a star was an echo of cosmic law, every alignment a message. The priests who read the heavens were not mere astronomers. They were interpreters of destiny. But behind this reverence lies something deeper, a system of knowledge that hints at mathematical and observational sophistication far beyond what history attributes to their age. The Mul-Apin tablets, dating back nearly 3,000 years, contain data that precisely describes the length of the solar year, planetary visibility, and star risings. Yet the knowledge encoded in them was already ancient by that time, suggesting it had been preserved from even earlier ages. And then there is the mystery of the Nibiru tablet, which speaks of a wandering star crossing the heavens, not a comet, not a planet as we know it, but something extraordinary. Some interpret it as myth, others as memory, a celestial event so significant it shaped the Sumerian understanding of the cosmos itself. What's most striking is not what they believed, but how much they knew. The Sumerians understood the earth as part of a larger system, a sphere moving through a celestial ocean. They mapped the equinoxes, measured solstices, and marked the precession of time with astonishing precision. These weren't random observations. They followed cosmic cycles, 12, 60, 360, numbers that became sacred in their mathematics, their temples, and their calendar. Even today, our hours, minutes, and degrees echo this Sumerian code. It was as if they were trying to synchronize human life with the rhythm of the stars. The question that lingers is, where did they learn it? Was it mere observation, refined over generations, or inheritance from a lost epoch, a pre-flood civilization that once understood the cosmic order in ways we've only begun to rediscover? In their myths, the gods, the Anunnaki, descended from the heavens carrying the tablets of destiny records of celestial law that governed both gods and men. These tablets, they said, contained the codes of creation, patterns reflected not only in the heavens, but in the human spirit. When we trace these patterns, the alignments of pyramids, ziggurats, and temples across the world, all pointing to specific stars and solstices, we find echoes of this same celestial code, a code that binds sky to stone, heaven to earth. Perhaps the Sumerians did not invent this knowledge at all. Perhaps they remembered it. Fragments of a universal understanding passed through flood and fire, waiting for rediscovery. And so, when we look at those ancient tablets today, at their lines and symbols etched in clay, we are not just reading the past. We are reading a message written for the future, that humanity's story has always been written in the stars. Across the temples of Egypt, the stones of Angkor, and the pyramids of Mesoamerica, one symbol coils through time: the serpent. It slithers across myth and scripture, science and superstition. To some it is evil, the deceiver of Eden. To others, it is the bringer of light, the keeper of ancient wisdom humanity once knew and then lost. Long before it became a creature of temptation, the serpent was a sacred emblem of knowledge, healing, and renewal. In Egypt, it was the uraeus, the rearing cobra crowning the pharaoh's brow, a symbol of divine authority and inner sight. It guarded the gates of the underworld and represented the power to move between realms, mortal and divine. The serpent was not feared. It was revered. In Mesoamerica, thousands of miles and oceans away, the same image reappeared: the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs, Kukulkan to the Maya. He descended from the sky bringing agriculture, writing, astronomy, the arts of civilization itself. He taught peace and wisdom, not war. But when the empire turned to blood and conquest, the feathered serpent vanished, promising to return when humanity was once again ready to listen. How did cultures separated by oceans and ages come to share the same symbol and the same story? The serpent winds through ancient India too, as Kundalini, the coiled energy said to rest at the base of the spine. When awakened, it rises through the body's spiritual centers, bringing enlightenment. A mirror of the serpent's ascent from the earth toward the heavens. In Greece, the symbol survives as the rod of Asclepius, entwined by a snake, still used today as a sign of medicine and healing. Everywhere it appears, the serpent carries one theme: knowledge that transforms. But somewhere along the way, something changed. In the texts of later empires, the Hebrew, the Roman, the Christian, the serpent was recast as the enemy of God, the corrupter of mankind. The Garden of Eden turned wisdom into sin, curiosity into rebellion. What had once symbolized the awakening of consciousness became the cause of humanity's fall. The question is, why? Was it coincidence or censorship? Ancient mystery schools spoke of dual knowledge, one for the public, one for the initiated. The serpent represented hidden truths, that within each human being lies the potential for divinity, for rebirth, for enlightenment without intermediaries. To rulers and empires built on control, this was dangerous. If every person could awaken, who would need priests or kings? And so the serpent was banished, turned from teacher to tempter, from symbol of inner light to embodiment of darkness. Yet traces of its ancient reverence still flicker through forbidden texts and esoteric traditions, in alchemy, in the caduceus of Hermes, in Gnostic hymns that call the serpent bringer of understanding. Perhaps the story was never about good versus evil, but about awareness versus obedience. The serpent was not man's downfall, it was his awakening. A force reminding us that wisdom is not granted from above, but discovered within. Across the ruins of time, carved into stone and myth, the serpent waits, coiled at the threshold between ignorance and understanding. It was never destroyed, only silenced. And now, as humanity once again questions its forgotten origins, its symbol stirs, whispering the same truth it always has, that the greatest power lies not in domination, but in awakening, and that enlightenment has always been the most forbidden knowledge of all. Beyond the edges of the ancient world, where the compass faltered and the sun never truly set, there were said to be lands bathed in eternal light. The Greeks called it Hyperborea, beyond the north wind. A place untouched by war or winter, where the air was sweet, the people lived for centuries, and harmony ruled beneath a golden sun. To the philosophers of Athens, Hyperborea was no myth, but a memory. Herodotus wrote of travelers who came from its radiant shores to bring gifts to Apollo, god of the sun. Pindar called it the land of the blessed, where music and peace filled the air. And yet no one could point to it on a map. Some said it lay beyond the snowy mountains of Thrace, others beyond the Arctic seas, a paradise hidden behind the veil of the northern winds. Centuries later, the legend resurfaced under a new name, Thule. To the Greeks of the 4th century BCE, the explorer Pytheas claimed to have sailed beyond Britain to reach this mysterious island. He described a land where the sea was neither water nor ice, but a thick, luminous substance, as if the elements themselves were blending into something otherworldly. The sun never truly rose or set. Day and night melted together. His reports were dismissed as fantasy. Yet modern science now tells us that is precisely how the Arctic Circle behaves. Could Pytheas have reached the edge of a lost civilization, a remnant of Hyperborea itself? The Norse sagas carry echoes of the same northern kingdom. They spoke of Ultima Thule, a realm beyond the known world, a place of the gods and ancestors. In their myths, it became Asgard, the shining home of the Aesir, suspended between earth and sky, connected by the rainbow bridge of light. To medieval monks, Thule was a place of pilgrimage and prophecy, the cradle of an ancient pre-Diluvian people whose wisdom had been scattered across the world after a great flooze. From Greece to Scandinavia, from the Druids to the Icelandic poets, the North was not merely a direction, it was an idea. The symbol of a lost age of light, when mankind lived closer to the divine. Even in Hindu cosmology, Mount Meru, the world's cosmic axis, is said to lie in the far north, glowing with perpetual dawn. Some modern theories suggest that Hyperborea and Thule may not have been fantasy at all, but fragments of a polar civilization wiped away by the shifting of ice and time. Ancient maps, like the Carta Marina or Mercator's lost polar charts, depict continents and islands around the North Pole, drawn long before satellite imaging existed. How did they know what the ice conceals? Perhaps the northern kingdoms were never entirely physical places, but states of consciousness, civilizations that reached a harmony of spirit and science so profound, later generations could only describe it as paradise. When cataclysms came, floods, freezes, tilts of the earth, the survivors carried the memory of that light southward, embedding it in myth, song, and stone. Even today, explorers and mystics speak of strange magnetic anomalies beneath the Arctic, of warm currents where none should exist, of auroras that pulse like the breath of a sleeping world. Maybe Hyperborea is not lost, only hidden, waiting beneath the ice, or perhaps within us, as the last echo of humanity's first golden age. And when the world grows cold and dark once more, we may find that the path to Hyperborea was never northward at all, but inward, toward the light that never dies. Across the face of the earth, scattered from Lebanon's mountains to Bolivia's high plains, lie monuments that defy both time and explanation. Cyclopean walls, seamless joints, and stones so vast they seem less built than grown from the earth itself. They speak of hands that worked not with crude tools, but with understanding that borders on the impossible. At Baalbek, in the heart of ancient Phoenicia, rests a foundation unlike any other. The trilithon, 3 megaliths, each weighing nearly 800 tons, forms part of the Temple of Jupiter. Even today, with all our cranes and steel, we cannot easily replicate the feat. Beneath them lies an even larger block, still resting in its quarry, the stone of the pregnant woman, weighing more than 1,000 tons. It was shaped, lifted, and positioned with a precision that mocks the limits of human strength. The Romans built upon it, yes, but they did not create it. The foundation was already ancient when they arrived. Who, then, were the first builders? Thousands of miles away, across oceans and continents, the mystery repeats itself. In the windswept Andes, the ruins of Puma Punku lie scattered like the remnants of a forgotten machine. Gigantic stone slabs are carved with interlocking notches, sharp angles, and drill-like precision. Each block seems designed to fit another with mathematical intent, as though the builders understood geometry and engineering beyond their era. Yet according to official timelines, they had no iron tools, no wheels, and no written records. At Sacsayhuaman, walls ripple with perfect interlocking stones, no mortar, no gaps, no explanation. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid's base is aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. In Japan's Yonaguni Monument, beneath the waves, lie terraces and stairways that mirror the geometry of temples, suggesting an ancient city swallowed by the sea. How could civilizations separated by oceans and millennia share the same architectural fingerprints, the same impossible mastery of stone? Some believe these builders shared a lost technology, perhaps sound, magnetism, or even a forgotten form of energy manipulation. Legends from around the world speak of stones that floated into place, guided by songs or tones that lifted matter itself. In the Andean highlands, local lore tells of priests using the power of sound to move mountains. Egyptian texts hint at sacred harmonics, the voice of the gods that could raise stones toward the heavens. Others suggest something even deeper, that these ancient architects were the survivors of an earlier global civilization, one that perished in the cataclysms that ended the last ice age. When the seas rose, when the earth shook, their cities were lost, but their knowledge lingered, carried by wanderers who rebuilt fragments of it in new lands. And perhaps that is why Baalbek, Giza, Tiwanaku, and Easter Island all share the same silent language of stone. Each monument, a fragment of a once unified vision, scattered like the shards of a great shattered mirror. What if these megaliths are not just relics, but reminders, testimonies carved in endurance itself, meant to whisper across ages that humanity has risen before, reached the heights of mastery, and fallen again? We look at them today as mysteries, yet perhaps they were never meant to be mysterious. Perhaps they were left behind as a message, a challenge, or a promise that we too can remember. That the power which shaped these stones is not lost, merely forgotten. And so the question remains, echoing across the deserts, mountains, and seas. Who were the architects of stone? And what world did they leave behind for us to rediscover?
History, we are told, is a line, clear, chronological, and absolute. A sequence of empires, inventions, and ages that unfolds in perfect order. But what if that line was never straight? What if it was bent, stretched, and broken, not by the passage of time, but by the hands that wrote it? This is the chronology of amnesia, the silent rewriting of humanity's memory. For centuries, empires have risen not only by the sword, but by the pen. The victors did more than conquer land. They conquered time itself. Every calendar, every record, every rewritten manuscript became a tool to shape what we remember and what we forget. When the Roman Empire ascended, they didn't merely inherit the past. They reconstructed it. The Julian calendar replaced older systems. Pagan gods became saints. Myths were recast today as mysteries. Yet perhaps they were never meant to be mysterious. Perhaps they were left behind as a message, a challenge, or a promise that we too can remember. That the power which shaped these stones is not lost, merely forgotten. And so the question remains, echoing across the deserts, mountains, and seas. Who were the architects of stone? And what world did they leave behind for us to rediscover? America's Jesuit history, we are told, is a line, clear, chronological, and absolute. A sequence of empires, inventions, and ages that unfolds in perfect order. But what if that line was never straight? What if it was bent, stretched, and broken, not by the passage of time, but by the hands that wrote it? This is the chronology of amnesia, the silent rewriting of humanity's memory. In the East, similar manipulations unfolded. Dynasties rewrote the records of their predecessors, often erasing entire reigns or extending their own to appear eternal. Wars were sanitized. Defeats became victories. The rulers of men became the architects of time. And then there were the wars. Each global conflict not only redrew borders, but redefined history. Museums were looted, archives destroyed, and documents altered under the pretext of modernization or reform. Even the printing press, once hailed as the great liberator of knowledge, became a double-edged sword, amplifying not truth, but whichever version of truth had the power to publish first. The deeper scholars dig, the more they uncover hints of temporal tampering. Missing centuries, overlapping reigns, duplicated histories, like the phantom time hypothesis, which suggests that portions of the Middle Ages may never have existed at all. Whether true or not, the theory reveals a haunting possibility, that even our most trusted timelines may be constructed illusions. But why would such deception endure? Because control over time
is control over meaning. If you can decide when something happened, you can dictate why it happened and who is to blame or to praise. It is power in its purest, most invisible form. And so, generation by generation, humanity forgot. We forgot what came before the calendars, before the empires, before history was tamed into neat chronological order. We forgot that perhaps civilization did not begin, but begin again, after each erasure, each cataclysm, each rewriting of the past. The chronology of amnesia is not just a mystery of the past, it is the very structure of our present. Our textbooks, our faiths, our timelines, all built upon layers of edits, omissions, and rebranding. Yet beneath those layers, fragments remain. Inscriptions, ruins, oral traditions, whispering of worlds older and more complex than our history dares to admit. If time itself has been rewritten, then to seek truth is not just to look back, it is to unlearn. To remember what we were never meant to know. In the dim glow of forgotten monasteries and the dust of ancient caves, whispers of forbidden knowledge have survived. Texts that tell of beings who once walked among us. They are called the Watchers, sentinels from the heavens who descended to guide, to teach, and some say, to defy. The story begins with the Book of Enoch, a text cast out from the official Bible, yet one that once shaped the imagination of prophets, mystics, and theologians alike. It speaks of a time before recorded history, when the world was still young and humanity naive. From the firmament, the Watchers descended, 200 of them, led by a figure named Semjaza. Their purpose was to observe, but curiosity became compassion, and compassion became rebellion. They taught humankind the secrets of heaven, how to read the stars, forge metal, use herbs, and paint the skin with beauty. They shared the mysteries of the earth itself, the patterns of creation, and the language of the elements. But as knowledge spread, so too did corruption. The Watchers mingled with mortals, and from their union came beings described as giants, the Nephilim. It was, the ancient texts say, the beginning of humanity's first fall, not from ignorance, but from knowledge. The story might sound mythic, yet fragments of it echo across cultures. In Sumerian cuneiform, they appear as the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended from the stars to shape early civilization. In Greek mythology, they are the Titans or Prometheus, punished for bringing fire or enlightenment to mankind. Even in Mesoamerican lore, the plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl, descends to teach art, science, and law before mysteriously vanishing. Different names, same pattern, the gift of forbidden knowledge, followed by silence. After the fall of these ancient ages, the guardians of knowledge were demonized. The Book of Enoch was banned by early church councils, deemed too dangerous to remain in Scripture. Yet it survived, preserved in the highlands of Ethiopia, hidden in caves near the Dead Sea, and echoed through Gnostic fragments discovered millennia later in Nag Hammadi. The Gnostic scrolls speak, too, of cosmic beings, eons and archons, entities who shape the spiritual architecture of reality. But where Orthodox religion saw sin and rebellion, Gnostic mystics saw awakening, a divine spark hidden in the human soul, meant to be reignited. Why, then, were these texts buried? Perhaps because they blurred the boundary between God and man, between creation and creator. They suggested that knowledge was not granted by divine decree, but stolen through courage, and that to those who sought to control faith was the most dangerous truth of all. Some scholars argue these books are pure allegory, symbols of enlightenment and fallibility. Others suspect they preserve fragments of a prehistoric contact, a time when humanity's evolution was nudged by beings we could only describe as gods.
Whatever the truth, one fact remains. These writings were erased deliberately, removed from canon, burned in inquisitions, hidden in vaults beneath the Vatican, or sealed within the sands of Egypt. And yet, they persist. Like ghosts of memory, they surface again and again, defying erasure. Perhaps the Watchers never truly vanished. Perhaps their teachings survive not in books, but in the unending human hunger to know, to question, to seek beyond the veil. For every age that forgets, another remembers. And somewhere in the silence between faith and reason, the voices of the Watchers still whisper, calling us back to the knowledge we once lost.
In the quiet of our age, when satellites map every inch of the earth and archives digitize the written word, it feels as though nothing remains unknown. Yet beneath this illusion of total knowledge, a deeper truth lingers. The greatest secrets were never truly lost. They were hidden. From the stones of Göbekli Tepe to the scrolls buried beneath Egyptian sands, from the sunken walls of Atlantis to the sealed chambers of the Vatican, humanity's story has always been one of remembrance and erasure. We dig, we discover, we marvel, and then we forget. The cycle repeats, again and again, as if some unseen rhythm governs not only civilization's rise and fall, but also its memory. Perhaps it was never about what was destroyed, but who decided what should survive. Every empire has edited history in its own image. Every religion, every kingdom, every ideology has rewritten the story of origins to justify its own existence. Knowledge that empowers the individual, that blurs the line between human and divine, is too dangerous to be left free. So it is hidden, sometimes under the sands, sometimes behind sacred walls, and sometimes inside us. Memory itself becomes a weapon, or a sanctuary. It can bind people to illusion, or awaken them to truth. Those who control memory control the present. Those who awaken memory threaten the foundation of power. When the Library of Alexandria burned, humanity lost more than parchment. It lost perspective, the vast interconnected vision of who we were. When Great Zimbabwe was denied its rightful centuries, an entire continent's memory was rewritten. And when ancient texts like the Book of Enoch or the Gnostic scrolls were buried, the human story was reduced from cosmic to small, from eternal to temporal. But the fragments remain. They whisper through forgotten symbols carved in stone, through myths that refuse to die, through intuition, that strange pulse that tells us we've been here before. They remind us that perhaps our ancestors were not primitive, but profoundly aware, that our civilizations are not the beginning, but the continuation of something older, deeper, and cyclical. And so the question shifts. What if the past we've been taught is not false, but incomplete? What if the lost civilizations, the forbidden books, and the erased sciences are not mysteries, but mirrors? Each rediscovered relic is a reflection, a fragment of who we were and who we still are. And in rediscovering them, we are not merely studying history, we are remembering ourselves. Because memory, once awakened, becomes power, it shatters illusions, it dismantles imposed hierarchies. It reveals that the human story was never about dominion or progress, but about connection, to the cosmos, to the earth, and to the echoes of civilizations that came before. And perhaps that is why it was hidden. For if humanity ever remembers its full story, if it recalls the vast continuum of wisdom stretching beyond recorded time, then control collapses. The gates of authority crumble, the myths of separation dissolve. We begin to see ourselves not as the final chapter of civilization, but as its next custodian. The stones, the stars, the scrolls, they have always spoken the same truth. That knowledge is eternal, that forgetting is a choice, and that every rediscovery is a quiet act of rebellion, a moment when memory becomes power once more. As the dust of history settles and the echoes of forgotten worlds fade, one truth endures. The past was never lost. It was only waiting to be remembered. As the final echoes of these forgotten worlds fade into silence, one question remains: why were they hidden at all? From the buried temples of the ancients to the forbidden pages of lost books, the truth still breathes beneath the dust of time, waiting for those who choose to remember. Here, in Mysteries of Earth, we walk the path between myth and memory, searching for fragments of a story that still shapes us today. If this journey awakened your curiosity, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to help us keep uncovering the voices that history tried to silence. Because every discovery begins with someone who dares to look deeper. Until our next exploration, keep wondering, keep seeking, for the Earth still remembers what we have forgotten. This is Mysteries of Earth.